Stop before you make up your mind about this, before the conclusion you have been building in the quiet and accumulating form of someone who has been watching something and drawing conclusions from the watching without the full picture, that the watching was not giving them in the partial and surface form of what was visible from the position the watching was happening from. Stop and listen, because what I am about to tell you about the third party and the relationship that involves them is not what the surface of the situation has been suggesting in the visible and partial form that the watching has been producing conclusions from without the full picture. That this reading has, for the specific Virgo, it found today, which is you. The relationship with the third party is not what you think in the specific and significant form of something that looks like one thing from the outside and is something different on the inside. And the difference matters for how you receive what is happening around you right now and what is about to happen in the next 72 hours for the specific Virgo this reading found. This reading has 4 layers. Stay for every single one, because the 4th layer is the one that changes everything you thought you understood about what is happening and who is on which side of it. Virgo, my beautiful Virgo, the picture is different from what you think, and the difference is in your favor. Welcome, and do not go anywhere. The first layer, and this one is about what you think you know about the third party and the relationship that involves them in the specific and surface form of what has been visible to you from the watching position you have been in for the period that preceded this reading, finding you today. I feel something very specific in your energy that I want to name precisely, because the naming is what makes this reading land in the specific and recognized form rather than the general and approximate. You have been interpreting in the specific and active form of someone whose mind has been working very hard on a puzzle that the available pieces were not quite enough to complete correctly in the fitting and landing form of a completed puzzle that holds together without the pieces forcing. The interpreting has been effortful in the specific and draining form of someone who has been running the same information through the same analysis repeatedly in the hope that the running of it again will produce a different and more satisfying result than the previous runnings produced before the next running arrived at the same unsatisfying place as the ones before it in the specific and frustrating cycle of interpreting with incomplete information. The incompleteness is not your fault. Spirit wants me to say that directly. Before the first layer goes further, you were working with what was visible from your position, and the visible form of the situation was genuinely ambiguous in the specific and real way of something that looks like multiple things. From the outside, before the inside form has been made available to the person watching from outside. But the conclusion you have been building toward from the ambiguous invisible form of what the watching has been producing as the conclusion the interpreting was arriving at before this reading stopped you, in the specific and stop before you conclude form of the first word of this reading is not what is actually happening in the inside form of the relationship with the third party that this reading can see and that you need to hear before the conclusion lands in the settled and wrong form of something concluded incorrectly from incomplete information. The second layer, stay with me, because this layer is where I tell you what the relationship with the third party actually is in the inside and real form that the surface has not been showing. From the watching position you have been in, the third party is not the threat. You have been interpreting them as, I want to say that directly, and completely without the softening or qualifying language that would leave room for the conclusion to continue forming in the wrong direction after the reading has tried to redirect it in the more accurate direction that the full picture points toward rather than the partial picture the watching was producing. The third party is not the threat. The relationship between them and the person who connects you to them is not what the surface suggested it was. When the surface was the only thing visible from the watching position, Spirit is showing me the actual form of this relationship. And I want to describe it precisely because the precise description is what collapses the wrong conclusion. In the specific and replacing form of accurate information, arriving to take the place of inaccurate conclusion before the inaccurate conclusion has been acted on in the specific and costly form of someone who acted from the wrong conclusion and who has to deal with the consequences of the action that the wrong conclusion produced. The relationship between the person and the third party is obligatory in the specific and not chosen form of something that exists because of circumstances rather than preference, in the specific and important distinction between a relationship that is chosen for the qualities of the person being chosen and a relationship that exists because the structure of the situation makes it present, regardless of whether the people in it would choose it. If the structure were different, the third party is not chosen. They are present because of the structure, and the person connected to you knows the difference in the specific and interior form of someone who is managing an obligation that they did not choose and that they would not choose if the structure allowed the choosing to produce a different result. What the surface looked like was the managing of the obligation in the specific and visible form of someone navigating something that is present in their life. And that requires navigation in the ongoing and present form of something that does not go away simply because it is not chosen, but that must be navigated in the daily and visible form that the watching produced conclusions about from the outside without the inside information about what the navigation was navigating and why the navigating looked like closeness from the outside, but was obligation from the inside. And the difference is everything in the specific and significant form of a distinction. That changes everything about how the situation and the person in it and the third party in it and the Virgo watching it from outside should be understood. Huh. Now, about the people talking about you, because that is the second part of the title, and it deserves its own specific attention in the full and honest form of what this reading can tell you about what the talking is actually about. The talking is not negative in the way the word talking sometimes implies in the gossip and judgment form of people saying unflattering things about the person being talked about to other people who will receive the unflattering things as information about the person. The talking is admiration in the specific and particular form of people who have been watching the Virgo handle the situation they have been in with the third party present in it and who have been noticing how the Virgo has handled it in the specific and impressed form of people who are talking about what they have been noticing, because what they have been noticing deserves to be talked about in the specific and positive form of something remarkable being remarked on by the people who witnessed it from their watching positions. The Virgo handled what a situation involving a third party that was ambiguous from the outside required of the person in it with the specific quality that the people watching are now talking about in the admiring and remarking form of people who saw something worth talking about. The third layer, stay with me, because this layer is about what happens next in the specific and arriving form of what the full picture, now that it has been delivered by this reading, produces for the Virgo who stopped before concluding and who now has the inside information rather than the outside surface, that the watching was producing conclusions from within the next 72 hours. Three things are arriving in the connected and simultaneous form of what the full picture makes possible for the specific Virgo it belongs to. The first thing arriving within 72 hours is a conversation in the specific and clarifying form of someone who wants to explain the inside form of the situation to the Virgo who has been watching from outside without the full picture and who is now in a position where the explaining is possible in the specific and opening form of a conversation that has been waiting for the right moment to deliver what the inside form of the situation actually is. The second thing arriving within 72 hours is a shift in how you hold the situation, in the specific and releasing form of someone who has been carrying a weight that was produced by the wrong conclusion that the incomplete information was producing, and who is now in a position to set the weight down because the conversation of the first arriving thing has delivered the inside information that makes the weight unnecessary in the specific and releasing form of someone who was carrying something that the correct information has now made unnecessary to carry. And the third thing arriving within 72 hours is the most significant in the specific and personal form of what this reading was always building toward. For the specific Virgo, it found clarity in the specific and complete form of someone who finally has the inside and outside picture of the situation they have been in simultaneously, rather than only the outside form that the watching was providing before this reading arrived and delivered the inside form in the full and complete picture that the 72 hours will confirm and complete. For the specific Virgo, this reading found, watch for this today, something small in the dynamic between you and the person connected to the third party that is slightly different from how that dynamic has been in the recent period of the watching and the ambiguous surface, a quality of something opening rather than the closed and ambiguous form it has been in. Watch for this tomorrow, the beginning of the clarifying conversation in whatever form the specific situation delivers it in. For the specific Virgo, this reading found, and by the end of the 72 hours, the full picture is yours in the complete and inside form of what was always actually happening. Now, the address to something I feel in the energy of many Virgos reading this, some of you are feeling a specific form of resistance to what this reading is saying, in the not ready to revise the conclusion form of someone who has been building that conclusion for long enough that it has its own weight and its own momentum, and revising it requires a specific form of willingness that is not always immediately available when the revision arrives, before the person is ready to receive it. Oof. I understand that resistance completely. Revising a conclusion that has been building is harder than forming a new one from the beginning, because the building has produced attachment to the conclusion in the specific and real form of something that has been worked for. And that resistance is not stubbornness It is the natural response of a mind that has done the work of building something, and that is being asked to revise it. Before the revising has been confirmed as necessary by the 72-hour conversation that this reading is pointing toward as the confirming form of the inside picture. What I am asking is only to hold the conclusion lightly for the next 72 hours without acting from it until the conversation arrives and confirms or corrects it in the specific and inside form of the full picture that the outside surface alone was not able to provide. The fourth layer, the most personal and the one this reading was always going to arrive at, I feel a question forming in you right now, and I want to name it before it speaks. The question is, why did I assume the worst? In the specific and honest form of a Virgo asking themselves, why the watching produced the conclusion it was building toward, rather than a more generous conclusion from the same ambiguous information. I want to answer that directly and without judgment. The conclusion was protective in the specific and intelligent form of a Virgo mind that has learned through specific and personal experience to protect itself from the cost of a situation that it assumed the worst about too late rather than early enough to have protected itself before the cost arrived. The protection arrived early this time, as it always does, for the Virgo who has been through enough to develop the early arriving form of the protection rather than the late arriving form that does not protect before the cost, but only after it. And this time, the protection was early enough, but the threat was not real. In the specific and significant distinction between protection that arrives early against a real threat and protection that arrives early against an ambiguous surface. That looked like a threat, but was not one on the inside. Whew. The protection worked exactly as it was designed to, and the situation turned out not to require it. And both of these things are good in the specific and relieving form of something that was prepared for and turned out not to be necessary, which is the best form of protection working for the person it is protecting. I want to give you something before this closes in the permission form that the early protecting Virgo specifically needs permission to let the conclusion go in the releasing and light holding form of someone who does not need to be right about the threat, to be smart about having watched for it. Watching for threats is intelligence, not paranoia, and finding out that the watching revealed a situation that was not threatening from the inside is not failure. It is the best possible outcome of watching carefully for the Virgo who has been in enough to have learned to watch carefully uh, you are protected. And the picture is better than you thought. And within 72 hours, the Insight Forum will confirm what this reading has already delivered. For the specific Virgo, this reading found right now, before the 72 hours that are already counting. Take gentle care of yourself, my beautiful Virgo. The third party is not the threat, and the people talking about you are saying something good, and you deserve to know both. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever discovered that a situation was different on the inside from what it looked like on the surface? Because if you have, this reading is for you. And if this landed somewhere real, subscribe, because there is more coming. For the Virgo who watches carefully and finds the truth.